Hello, I'm Brandy Agerbeck of LooseTooth.com, and in this video I'd like to talk about graphic recording, graphic facilitation, the definitions of each, the differences between the two, and the difference in the definitions depending on who you ask. In a previous video I described how the heck I got into this work, and the very short story there is in 1996 I started contracting with Ernst & Young. They were looking for a network of contractors to help run change management workshops. Those workshops used a process from a company called MG Taylor. The very first day, we were taught that all of us were facilitators, and no matter what role we were doing, we were there to help facilitate the participants, to help them get more work done, to do better work. It was our job to make their work easier. So there are a lot of different roles within that environment. One, you could have been writing the assignments for the participants, or you could have DJ'd and sort of worked the musical transitions between exercises. You might have been rearranging all the furniture so the environment was set up perfectly for the next exercise. Or you could do what I was doing, which was graphic facilitation, mapping out the group's conversations on giant dry erase boards as they were talking. So day one, we learned that we were all facilitators. So I did that work from 96 to 99 and was happy to learn an absolute ton about facilitation and process from the MG Taylor process that Ernst & Young used, and to learn a ton about different kinds of clients in different industries from Ernst & Young's clientele. So I left in 99, and then 2000 was the first year that I went to the IFVP conference, the International Forum of Visual Practitioners. So this is a conference for people who do what the heck I do. And that first conference was very illuminating. I learned a ton. One thing I learned was a lot of people who do this work call themselves graphic recorders. And I also learned that a large part of the community came from The Grove, this company in San Francisco led by David Sibbett. I also learned that a lot of people's approach felt very different than mine. I met a lot of folks who, this is my opinion, this is my experience, they had a very kind of passive role in the room. So some folks who really like sort of be a ninja and kind of disappear when they were working. They'd like to sort of, not even be seen. Or they would sort of feel like, the meeting was being channeled through them and put on the piece of paper. Perfectly valid approach, just one that didn't resonate with me. I always felt like I had a more active role as a facilitator. I may be the silent partner to a traditional facilitator, but I am facilitating nonetheless. I just felt like I had a more active role. So since then, in so many conversations with colleagues, there has been this constant discussion about what is graphic recording and what is graphic facilitation, and how do they meet or don't meet in the middle. I do think it's very important that each individual feels comfortable with the job title they have and the way they talk about their work and present themselves. I do think it's important that a community have a shared language, both internally, so we know what the heck we're talking about, but also externally, so there's some common messages going out in the world, and common terms so that our clients, when they're looking for us, know what the heck they're looking for. But I also think that we as a community have spent an inordinate amount of time talking about graphic recorders versus graphic facilitators, and who's who and what's what. We've just spent a ton of time talking about it and trying to find this magical consensus where we're all going to agree on terms. And that's just not going to happen. For instance, again, I kind of came up with the MG Taylor methodology, where what I did was called graphic facilitation. It was a term that made sense and felt right to me. With the Grove methodology, I'm not a graphic facilitator. By their definition, a graphic facilitator is somebody who both maps the conversation and facilitates the meeting. So there's a difference in terms. So again, a lot of conversation going on about this versus this, and I personally would love to see more conversation happening with clients talking about the distinctions versus, trying to reach some kind of consensus within our own enclave. So to that end, to talk to the greater world at large and educate folks who want to be us, become graphic facilitators or recorders, and the folks who want to work with us. There's this video. So I'm going to talk about two general ways that I find those distinctions between graphic recorders and graphic facilitators having some kind of nuance and distinction. First is, what is the kind of partnership that I have with my clients, or the clients have with me? How collaborative is that relationship? That's one sort of lens to look at this. Another lens to look at this is, what does the work look like when it's, what's the sort of shape of the work? What does the work look like on the wall? So first, if we talk about the collaboration, if we look at a spectrum and you've got graphic recorders on one side and graphic facilitators on the other, and you've got a whole lot of, steps in between, we talk about partnerships and collaboration. I generally see that folks that are on the graphic facilitation end want to have a much more collaborative experience with their clients. They want to talk through the agenda, see what the role of visual tools are, all that kind of good stuff. Whereas graphic recorders may be less likely to want to partner. They may be more happy to be hired to come in with their roll of paper and their markers and not necessarily have a lot of input or conversation around the agenda. Again, that's just sort of a general trend that I see. My personal approach is that I am happy anywhere on that spectrum, and I take my cue from my client. I have 16 years of experience as a graphic facilitator and a very unique perspective of working with a ton of different facilitators. So I've seen a bunch of different working styles, a ton of different processes. So my toolbox is super full with a lot of possibilities. And if you want to talk through how to best use visual tools, how to best use my skills, I'm totally receptive. I'm just as happy to work on this end of the spectrum where somebody calls me up and says, we need you next week with your paper and your markers, let's go, and I'm parachuted in with very little collaboration. That's totally fine with me too, because I know when I get up to that wall, when I get up to that sheet of paper, I'm still going to completely facilitate that group through my imagery, whether I've had a lot of collaboration with my client over the agenda or not. So you'll find people on different parts of that spectrum. There are some folks over here who only want to work collaboratively. They hear the idea of being parachuted in with the roll of paper and the markers, and they're just, frustrated that, they're not being utilized in that more collaborative way. So some folks, they only want the collaboration. Some folks on this end, either they have a preference not to be that collaborative with their personality, or maybe they don't have the capacity. It could be simply that they're good at this specific role, but they don't have a lot of experience or knowledge or ability to collaborate around facilitation more broadly. So that's one spectrum to keep in mind, regardless of what somebody calls themselves, sort of this sort of spectrum of wanting to be highly collaborative with you as a client, or wanting to be pretty hands-off and just come in, let me do my work, we're good to go. So that's one spectrum. The second spectrum is about the way the work looks. And again, there's a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different ways people do this work. But again, if you think about the spectrum, you've got graphic recorders, graphic facilitators. On this end of the spectrum, these folks tend to be more inclined to get a lot of detail when they capture and capture the language of the group verbatim. They may have sort of a more journalistic approach where they are sort of reporting and capturing, exactly what's being said. Some of this work also tends to be fairly linear and very detailed, where it's sort of detail, 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 and less integrated. On this side, with the graphic facilitators, you may see more work where there is, again, more integration of different points with each other, finding the patterns, making the connections. Folks on the graphic facilitation side may be more inclined to do more organizing of the content and synthesis of the content. Now, on this side of things, the folks who are about strictly recording, some of them believe that any kind of change in the client's language is editorializing and it's verboten. I'm totally on this side of the camp, where I say that my ability to distill down the client's language is helping the group. It's helping, bring more clarity and understanding to what's happening. And I'm just wired to be really great at synthesis. So, if you were the kind of client who wanted somebody on this side who gave very detailed capture, it would make me crazy and I'd be a terrible match. But if you wanted somebody who was really great at integrating all the ideas and making all the connections into an integrated whole, then I'm your gal. So again, that's a second kind of spectrum. What does the work look like? In the fact that, is it more detail-oriented and maybe more linear, or is it more synthesis and more integrated and spatially connected? So that's another spectrum. Fundamentally, what you need to do is, whether you're a practitioner talking to your clients or you're a client seeking a practitioner, is to sort of talk through some of this stuff. How do you ask each other, how do you work best? What are you looking for? What do you think the group needs? So you can find a good fit when it comes both to the level of collaboration and a good fit when it comes to what ways is somebody going to approach the work and how they capture it. So that's just sort of a really broad this versus this. But again, I'm not trying to make it, recorder versus facilitator. I do think we as a community have spent just, crazy amounts of time just talking about this, trying to get consensus. Again, we're not going to reach consensus. I'm personally not a big fan of consensus. I think consensus is highly overrated. I think we work in this giant territory of visual tools to help people do good work. And when you think about it more broadly, we're actually two siblings that are incredibly close to each other. We're both people who map out these conversations live as people are meeting, and we understand how valuable that is. And the differences of the nuance in it, they're pretty minor in the grand scheme of, getting up in front of people and helping map their conversations so they can do better work, whether they call themselves a graphic recorder or a graphic facilitator. And again, this is this broad area of work that holds a ton of different things. It holds those two things. It holds sketch noting, visual note-taking, idea mapping, mind mapping, that whole sort of personal visual note-taking. It now holds things like the RSA Animate videos and those, whiteboard animations, that way of producing a visual to a specific piece of content, usually audio content. And a ton of, data visualization, information graphics, presentation design. That's a whole big world of all these visuals. And again, we're one piece within that. And hopefully this video has helped bring a little bit of clarity about the nuances between graphic recorders and graphic facilitators. You are invited to find the title that works best for you as a practitioner. And I definitely hope that this is giving you a little bit more information as a client about the types of ways of working with us. So I am Brandy Agerbeck of loosetooth.com. I'm a graphic facilitator, and I wrote the book, The Graphic Facilitator's Guide. So you can see more of my work, loosetooth.com. Thank you for watching.